Okay, what I wanted to do to wrap up the semester was to go ahead and come back to a chapter that I had skipped earlier to make sure that we could go ahead and cover the judiciary chapter pretty well. And that chapter that I skipped was actually the regimes chapter. In this chapter, really what we're going to be doing, and this is a quickie chapter. We can knock this off pretty fast since we're not going to be using the articles with it. But basically, when you look at this, we're talking about three kinds or three forms of government. We're talking about democracy, we're talking about totalitarian, and we're talking about authoritarianism. And I'm going to have this outline posted in my MC as I have the video in there probably this afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. Now, having said all this, just to get this started, democracy. We all have a tendency of thinking what we know democracy is. But to take a look at the chapter on this, they offer a number of different definitions. And I'll go ahead and hit this. This is actually from the second full indented paragraph on page 97. It's the second line. Democracy today is a political system which supplies regular constitutional opportunities for changing governing officials, a social mechanism which permits the largest possible part of the population to influence major decisions by choosing among contenders for political office. So basically what we're saying here, regular constitutional opportunities for changing officials, and then a social mechanism, like an election, for example, that is going to allow the largest part of the population to influence major decisions. In its most basic form, this is what democracy is, at least today, according to the chapter. You get two basic kinds up here. Number one is going to be direct democracy. And the idea behind direct democracy is that we all gather together, we all make decisions, and then ultimately we all go home. In a direct democratic type of a system, it's not like there are politicians. We are effectively the politicians. I mean, think about it. Really what we're saying in today's world is we don't trust politicians. We don't like politicians. Maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. Well, in direct democracy, we all periodically would get together, we would all vote, and then we would go forward. If it got to the point where internet voting was widely accepted, we could conceivably vote on any number of measures over the course of time, right through the internet. Everything would be copied, everything would be counted, and ultimately these would be the laws that would take effect. Now, on the one hand, we may not like our politicians today. On the other hand, we may not like everybody getting online, maybe doing some fraudulent things, maybe writing some bills that really they don't know what they're talking about, that could completely contradict or completely unwind our system of government. But direct democracy says everybody speaks, everybody votes, and then you go forward with that. Now, having said this, let me give you this quote from page 96. And this quote on page 96, it's right above the last indented paragraph on page 96. It says, "A true democracy, a system in which all citizens meet periodically to elect officials and personally enact laws, has been rare. Athens General Assembly and New England Town Hall meetings are good examples. Direct democracy goes all the way back to Athens, Greece, so this is a long time ago. New England Town Hall meetings, they're nice, but it's not like they're going to be ruling an entire state, an entire city, or an entire county. They're going to be ruling a smaller element of it." And if you've ever seen the movie Pleasantville, Pleasantville is an example when the mayor meets with all of the people in the city of a town hall direct democracy kind of circumstance where everybody gets together and everybody makes the decision, even though it might not always be the right one. Representative democracy. Representative democracy is what we technically have in the United States today. We all don't vote on everything that we want to see passed or that we want to see killed, but under representative democracy, we are going to elect representatives that are going to make the decisions for us. So in the United States, we vote for House members, and they will attempt to propose and pass laws. In the United States, we're going to vote for senators. They too are going to attempt to propose and pass laws. We vote directly for these people. So in the sense of this, it's a direct election, which we've talked about, but it's a representative system because they are making decisions for us, so we technically don't have to think about them. In a direct democracy where everybody votes on everything, hopefully everybody's thinking about everything that they're voting on, and that would be really the difference between these two. Now, the chapter mentions 4 points up here that are really, really important for democracy. One of them is accountability, one of them is choice, one of them is majority rules and minority rights, and one of them is political equality. Accountability. The basic idea behind accountability is that you've got to have regular elections. You've got to have regular elections. And what I mean by this in terms of accountability is this. If I got elected to office, whatever office it might be, and I got in there and I did a damn good job, then in theory, I should be held accountable for my successes, meaning the voters should have the ability to put me back into office. If I have done a lousy job as an elected official, I should still be held accountable. But instead of being voted into office, I should be held accountable by being able to be removed from office. So that's what accountability is, regular elections. Think about the last exam. Every 4 years, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, we have a regular election for the President of the United States. That is what we're talking about with accountability. You always know that it's going to be at that time, but you're held accountable. Now, having said this, accountability, choice. Let me give you this quote from page 99. And it says up here, talking about choice. And actually, let me hold off on the quote. Choice basically means that there are going to be legitimate options. There are going to be legitimate options when you go to the polls. Let me give you a good example of this. In the old Soviet Union, there were always, 10 candidates, 15 candidates that you could conceivably vote for in the old Soviet elections. The problems, though, was that they were all communists. Every single one of them, 1 through 10, 1 through 15, 1 through whatever number, they were always communist, 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 communist. Did you have a choice? Well, yeah, you had a choice as far as who the person was going to be. But did you have a choice as far as their ideology? Did you have a choice as far as their mindset? Did you have a legitimate choice as far as their party or their policy is concerned? Well, the obvious answer to this is no, you didn't. The idea behind legitimate choice is that you need to have different voices in the system. You hear about some states. Mexico has been an example of this historically, where they have a one-party democracy. You can vote for whoever you want as long as it's in the one party. And if you vote on somebody else, it's not like they're going to kill you, but to be honest with you, it's like wasting your vote. It's not like you're really going to get anything really changed or substantially done. Well, when you put this into context, in a number of places around the world, choice is there. In the United States, we've got the Democrats and the Republicans. Some folks would suggest that the Democrats and the Republicans are a lot closer than we think, and we almost need the rise of a third party to get the Democrats and the Republicans to start acting like legitimate political parties again instead of spoiled children. You go into other countries, and some people would argue that if you've got 10 parties or 12 parties or 15 parties, you actually have too much choice. But the bottom line is that you've got to have legitimate choice. Accountability through elections is the first big piece to this. But if everybody that you vote on is basically the same, it's not really choice. You've got to have legitimate options. And it mentions up here, and now I'll get to the quote at the top of page 99. This is the 4th line. A certain percent of the electorate must be up for grabs to keep politicians worried and attentive to the nation as a whole. Right now, the Republicans are just finishing up their primary where they're trying to get their base together. The Democrats, in theory, have their base together. And right now, about 35% of the country, give or take, is Democrat. About 30% of the country, give or take, is Republican. But what that means is that there's still 35% of the country in the middle that's undecided. Obama is not a shoo-in to win, and certainly Romney is not a shoo-in to get beat this fall, because of that 35% that's undivided, and part of the choice for ultimately who becomes president, a big part of it, in fact, is going to be decided by those folks that are in the middle. Number 4 up here, majority rules, minority rights. In theory, if I get more votes, I win. Majority should rule. Don't tell that to Al Gore, but in theory, majority should rule. Having said this, while you want to respect the rights of the majority, the rules that the majority wants to impose, you've also got to respect the rights of the minority. Because if majority rules could conceivably discriminate based on race, or discriminate based on gender, or cause potential problems within the political system, you got to have a balance there. Because the majority ruling can't step on minority rights, and the minority rights cannot overrule what the majority is that you want. So in fact, this is where the courts begin to play larger roles. This is where interest groups begin to play larger roles. This, in fact, is where, when you really sit down and you think about it, the legislatures are going to have some of their most difficult fights, because there are even going to be factions that are within the legislatures. But you've got to have majority rules and protection for minority rights at the same time. And then the last one up here is going to be political equality. Under political equality, what we're talking about is that everybody counts the same. This isn't to say that everybody believes the same, and this certainly isn't to say that everybody is the same. This is just to say that everybody counts the same. So, if I go to the polls and vote, I am one person and I have one vote. if other people, Michelle or Maya or Sean or Jonah or Jesse or Gordy, go to the polls and vote, they are one person each, they will have one vote each, and their one vote that they cast will be equal to the one vote that I cast. The sense of it is that you've got to have political equality. When you look back at the United States, it used to be that slaves were considered 3/5 of a person. When you look back at United States history, there were some congressional districts that had 1 million people in them. And then there were others that maybe had 100,000. The votes didn't count the same, but in theory, this is exactly what you're striving for in a democratic system. Now, let me jump to totalitarian. If democracy is one extreme, where you talk about the rights of the majority and the rights of the minority, the rule of the majority, if you're talking about elections and choice and equality and these types of things, totalitarianism goes at the exact other end of this chart. And let me read you a couple of quotes dealing with totalitarianism. And this is from page 105 and 106. Second line on page, or very top of page 105. In totalitarian systems, elites are almost completely unaccountable. They lock themselves into power and are very difficult to oust, short of regime collapse. It goes on, the last two lines. In its emphasis on total control, brainwashing, and worship of the state and its leaders has proven mistaken and inefficient. And it goes on to page 106, and this is probably the first full indented paragraph at the middle of the page. Note that all three countries had been deranged by World War I, and this is Italy, Germany, and Russia. Totalitarianism, a word coined by outside analysts in the 1930s, is a system in which one party holds total power and attempts to restructure society in accordance with party values. Freedom disappears. The old autocratic rulers keep their subjects quiet, but the totalitarian state insists on mass enthusiasm. Now, I want you to think about this. The ideology, and this is maybe overly simplified, but not much. You're either black or you're white. Everything, when they look at the rules, are black and white. You're either pregnant or you're not. There's a clear divide. You're either with me or you're against me. And in a totalitarian state, as long as you're with me, we are going to want to whip up mass enthusiasm so that you're wildly in favor of the state, wildly in favor of the nation, wildly in favor of the leaders, wildly in favor of the government and the policies. And if you're not with us and you don't demonstrate that mass enthusiasm, then now you're an enemy of the state and you better watch your back. You better watch your back. Remember what it says in there. Freedom disappears. We were laughing about this in one of my earlier classes today because we were talking about an article where somebody flipped off or shot the middle finger to President George Bush. And somebody from the People's Republic of China said in the earlier class, if you disrespect a leader of mine in PRC, then indeed this is treasonous and you could be killed for this. It sounds silly, but this is exactly what we're talking about. Freedom disappears. Mass enthusiasm. You're with us or you're against us. And remember some of these things that I had mentioned up here. Total control, brainwashing, and worship of the state. Now, to this end, communications. Totalitarian states are going to control the communication. They're going to control the information. They're going to control what it is that you see, what it is that you read, what it is that you hear. Think about earlier this semester, we did a censorship assignment. The censorship assignments, the songs that you gave me, oftentimes criticize the government, sometimes blatantly criticize the government, stopping just short of telling them to go to hell, and other times blatantly saying that they were guilty of war crimes against their own people. That would not be tolerated. The news media. In the United States, when you turn on the news, it's not about watching the news anymore, but it's really about what version of the news that you want. If you want a more liberal take on things, maybe you go to MSNBC. If you want a more conservative take on things, maybe you go to Fox News. In a totalitarian country, because they control communications, everybody gets one station, and everybody gets one version, and that's all there is to it. Communications are controlled. Information is limited. The internet can be shut down at different points. This is what we're saying. The other piece to this is weapons. If you don't like things, think about the United States, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. In theory, this is the right to be able to defend yourself. In theory, if we ever get invaded, this would be the right to defend the country. But the right to bear arms is there, and this is something that everybody knows about, whether it be the United States government or other people that might want to cause problems here. In totalitarian countries, there are no weapons for the people. So if you don't like something, in a lot of respects, you're going to be powerless to do anything about it. You're going to be powerless to do anything about it because you don't have any communication, you don't have any control of communication, you don't have any accurate communication or information, and in the grand scheme of things, you don't have the weapons to try and basically impose or, I guess, not impose, but certainly to be able to provide an alternative change with the weapons. There's nothing that you can do. So this is strike two. The other piece on this is no choice. There is no choice in a totalitarian state. In the United States, we've got some rules, and these rules would suggest that if a president is alive, you can't put the president on money. You can't put the president on a monument. You can't put the president on Mount Rushmore. You can't have large, gigantic banners with the president on it in public buildings. And to be honest, you're really not even supposed to have portraits of the president on school walls. Why? Because there's a sense out there that you're making the president something that's larger than life. And you're going to make it more difficult to be able to disagree. Well, in a totalitarian system, they're going to glorify the leader. There are going to be the huge banners. There are going to be the large statues. There's going to be the leader on the money. There are going to be the pictures in the walls of the schools so that kids are socialized at a young age that the leader is that important. They're being socialized for no choice, for obedience, for mass enthusiasm. It starts right there. So think about that when you think about a totalitarian state. They are going for it. They want you to be in favor of what they're doing, and in fact, subtly and sometimes not so subtly through communications, not so subtly through weapons, they're going to be able to make you do those things, and ultimately it's going to be this way because you've got no choice. Think about one last thing, and I'll leave you with this for totalitarian. Think about the last Star Wars movie. If you look at the last Star Wars movie, and I will add this clip in there, totalitarian states are absolute states. And if you look at Star Wars, when Anakin is getting ready to fight Obi-Wan on the lava planet, if you look at it, they're basically speaking in absolutes. And they're saying in that movie, you're either with me or you're against me. You join me or you're going to die. I'm going to have to kill you. This is what we're talking about in totalitarian states. Maybe a little overly dramatic, maybe a little Hollywood, but in the grand scheme of things, Darth Vader became a totalitarian type leader in the sense that he was going to make other galaxies or states or planets do what he wanted them to do. And again, there wasn't going to be any choice about it. I'll pick up in just a second with authoritarianism.